Dear participants, dear colleagues, good morning. I'm Tonko Obuljen, BEREC Chair 2024 from HAKOM, Croatia, and I'm honored to welcome you to workshop Digital Network Developments, Player and Strategies, organized by BEREC. Today we are diving together into a transformative journey which is reshaping the telecommunication landscape. So cloudification is not just a buzzword anymore. It is a reality, and it is driving innovation and efficiency in our networks. Our industry is witnessing a seismic shift towards cloud-based solutions, and we have seen it recently during Mobile World Congress in Barcelona. Cloud platforms offer unparalleled flexibility, allowing network operators to dynamically allocate resources and swiftly adapt to changing demands. Virtualization plays a pivotal role in this evolution. By abstracting network functions from physical infrastructure, virtualization enables operators to optimize resource utilization and accelerate service deployment. It empowers us to break free from constraints of traditional hardware-based architectures, thus paving the way for innovation and rapid experimentation. As we navigate this dynamic ecosystem, it is our imperative to strike a balance between fostering innovation and safeguarding consumer interests. Furthermore, the entry of large content and application providers into the electronic communications market reshapes the competitive landscape, and their presence introduces new challenges and opportunities, driving collaboration and competition. BEREC remains committed to exploring the impact of these trends on regulation and competition, in line with our strategic goals to promote connectivity, to foster the development of sustainable and open digital markets, and empower end users. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to fruitful discussions ahead.
Can I start, Marjan?
Yes, do you see the slides? Oh.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Yes. Sure.
Thanks. So good morning, everyone. We were commissioned by BEREC in 2023, a few months ago, to a study on the cloudification, virtualization, and softwarisation in the value chain of electronic communication services and networks. Next slide, please. Marjan, can you go to next slide? Thank you. Thanks. So our presentation begins with the objectives of the study. So we navigated the provisioning of ECNS through the lens of cloudification and virtualization. We live in a time where technological advancements occur at a rapid pace, and they bring forth new competitive dynamics along the value chain that must be closely observed and understood. So a first objective was to describe the current technical evolution and market trends. A second objective of the study was to examine new business models and their competitive impact, because as these technologies reshape the landscape, they also give birth to innovative business models that are both disruptive and transformative. In parallel with with this technological shift, we also looked for potential regulatory and policy challenges, which was the third objective of the study. And within this framework, we have also looked at the imperatives of cybersecurity and sustainability. And to finish with this project overview, the methodology that we used was a mix of research from various sources, including 20 interviews with different stakeholders, including operators, vendors, and regulators. I will now leave the floor to Rudolf on the technology findings. Next slide, please.
Yes, thank you, Aude. I'm Rudolf Vandenberg from Stratex Consulting in the Netherlands. What we did in the interviews was under Chatham House rules, which allowed people to speak a bit more freely and gave us a better insight into how the market is really developing. What you on the one hand see is a cloudification, virtualization, softwarisation are really established concepts. People have different ideas, but they are pretty much aligned on what it means in the market. What you see is that there is quite a difference between what happens in the network and what happens in the supporting systems, for example, billing support, etc. Billing support is easier to be cloudified. What happens in the network needs to be more local and is more operator specific. So sharing a billing system with multiple operators run by a vendor is easier to establish than virtualizing your whole network. And it is continuously evolving. Could somebody turn off there? Anyways, yes, thank you. Deployment dev takes many different forms, and it's not easy to say, oh, this will happen everywhere. What is clear is that it forces operators and vendors to use more open interfaces and less proprietary solutions. And this also causes them to reevaluate how they look at security, for example. If it's internal, people often think that it must be secure. The moment it has more open interfaces, people start wondering whether the security has been arranged properly. Open RAN is a development to push this deeper into the access layer. Despite the hype, there are also quite a lot of concerns of operators with how far this goes and how well it is supported by vendors. When looking at security, this is paramount generally for all operators, and particularly cloudification, as I said, pushes further thinking about it. And policymakers really want to mitigate and minimize the risk, but this is mostly outside of the purview of BEREC, more inside the environment of ENISA and the like. Environmental sustainability is a challenge, and there are some concerns that cloudification may be less sustainable, though others think that because more resources are shared, it might actually be more sustainable. Unfortunately, there are not really concrete and proven cases yet. Next slide. We've done a couple of use case studies as well as part of this research. We've looked at 5G private networks, mission critical mobile public voice, and cloudification MVNOs to see what cloudification virtualization can deliver there. What you see is that 5G private networks, for example, in the harbor of Rotterdam for container terminals, but also in factories across Europe are gaining increasing traction. And there the hope is that cloudification may help. And some parties are very active in that, but it's mostly still in the pilot stage. And some customers actually want it on premise. So yeah, there are different developments there. mission critical mobile public voice is something that many police forces, ambulances, firemen, etc. really are looking for. Cloudification may help there. There are some developments in standardization, but so far little concrete development, and the plans that have been made are a bit behind. I see something that there is, okay, people can see can hear me, yes, okay. And cloudification and MVNOs, there seems to be a two-sided development there. On the one hand, cloudification enables MVNOs of some types. On the other hand, it also seems that certain cloud functions require larger scale, make it more difficult for smaller parties to operate. So there is a balance here.
Maybe we can see it after. Yeah. Is there something?
Could somebody, Ines, could you, thank you. So in the end, it is, these use cases mostly show that there's still a lot of work to do, that they might develop these use cases, but we're not there yet. Next slide, or I give the floor back.
Yeah, thanks, Rudolf. So the report details the concepts and the impact on the value chain and the practical considerations for deployment of these technologies. We then looked at the impacts on the markets. Our findings highlight that the digital transformation of CSPs, the communication service providers, is driven by technical evolution, and it goes across all functions through infrastructure and network equipment, through network operations, business support, and communication services. It was also noted that the CSPs adopted a wait-and-see approach, which is driven by technical factors, also by standardization factors, as well as financial and operational drivers. The CSPs are exploring new business models. They do that by leveraging their network infrastructure to provide connectivity between cloud facilities and also between users and cloud facilities. And the report gives a view on the corresponding uncertainties and risk associated to that. We have also observed the growing prominence of hyperscalers, whose role in the market is becoming increasingly significant and multifaceted. They position themselves as partner, as intermediaries, and also as competitors in the telecom space, like, for example, in private networks. And as a result of all that, another observation was that the vendor landscape had diversified with a variety of suppliers and vendors providing facilities and services to CSPs. Open systems and APIs have also emerged as key facilitators for this diversification, because they allow for seamless integration and development of varied business models. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this will be the next slide of our the last slide of our presentation. The impact of cloudification, virtualization, and softwarisation is broad, and it extends beyond the ECNS value chain to envelope, I would say, related markets. And the study shows that regulators must remain dynamic and vigilant and conduct ongoing analysis to navigate the shifting trends. collaboration between regulatory bodies is really paramount to address the potential issues presented by this technology evolution. In terms of potential regulatory issues, we have identified a few. The influence of upstream vendor markets could be one of them. The disaggregation of the network functions and the diversity in the supply chain have of course the potential to strengthen the openness and to boost competition, but it will also depend on other factors like the transparency and the effectiveness of APIs, for example. The competition within cloud markets and their adjacent markets, especially considering the influence of hyperscalers, and there are also concerns around vendor lock-in and the ability of users to switch between cloud ecosystem. So that could be another potential regulatory issues that has been identified. The global scale's impacts on smaller market and operators because of, among others, because of smaller bargaining power. The investment uncertainties that are caused by rapid technological advancements and also the need for a swift standardization. These are also another potential issue to watch. The risk of digital exclusion is sorry. The digital exclusion is also a common feature of I mean the risk related to digital exclusion is a common feature of technology evolution. It's not proper to cloudification, but this was identified also. Regarding the network and data security, the report shows that networks, vendors, and regulators are working to mitigate incremental risks. This is something that Rudolf mentioned earlier. And finally, in the study, we report on the impacts on environmental sustainability of cloudification. Some of this is positive, related to more traditional network architectures, including benefits from reduced use of physical hardware or reductions in site visits or optimization of virtualized network functions. Nevertheless, there are also environmental costs, for example, driven by the increasing needs for data storage, even if we use more efficient solutions. So to conclude this presentation, I would say that the study serves not only as a map of the current landscape today, but also as a compass, I would say, towards future explorations with market and regulatory issues to watch, to ensure a fair competition and to protect consumers. So this is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for listening to us.
Hello, good morning, and thank you very much, Rudolf and Aude, for the presentation. I will continue with the presentation of the BEREC report on cloud and edge computing that was published yesterday for public consultation, and it was also presented for the first time at the BEREC public debriefing of the plenary. Thank you very much to all of you who are for the interest in joining the workshop and attending this presentation. Can I have the next slide, please? So, first of all, why a BEREC cloud and edge computing report? Well, it was mainly due to two reasons. First, to understand this growing interplay, synergies, and convergent trends that are taking place between telecommunications and cloud. and that can imply significant changes for the sector, as it has been also acknowledged by the DNA, the white paper from the European Commission. And also as a way to support the Data Act enforcement, as some telco NRAs have been identifying in this regulation as well placed to enforce the particular switching and interoperability obligations in this piece of legislation. To prepare this work, we have built on previous reports. The first one is the external study that has been just presented. And also on very recent solid and comprehensive market studies carried out by regulators such as the ACM, Ofcom, and also more recently the French National Competition Authority. We also had a very good number of interviews with several types of industry players and associations, and for this we are also very thankful for the good cooperation and the availability shown by the stakeholders, and maybe some of them are also attending this workshop. Next slide, please. So this is the general overview of the index of the reports that the main topics that we address. We'll develop on that. So please, can I have the next slide? We start with the basics. We take a stock of the legal definitions, the characteristics, and the interrelation and differentiation between cloud, edge, and the data processing services definitions. We also gather the already very well-known classifications of cloud services on the different cloud stacks, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, and also the different deployment models between public, private, and hybrid. As well, we also make a mention to the definition of multi-cloud, taking into account its importance in the context of the Data Act. Also in this chapter, in view of the capabilities provided by these services, we also underline the synergies between cloud and edge and 5G standalone, artificial intelligence, and IoT that altogether will be able to enable future digital transformation. Next slide. We follow them with the challenges that we identified that may hinder the development of the services in the EU. We name, for instance, the investment requirements, competition concerns, sustainability, the lack of sufficient skilled workforce, interoperability challenges, the need to develop new the use cases, cybersecurity, among others. We also acknowledge that those challenges have been addressed by a significant number of EU initiatives in the last years. We point to the Digital Decade Policy Program that establishes some objectives in terms of investments and take-up of cloud and edge computing, the European Data Strategy, of course, the Data Act, Digital Markets Act, and among many others. All in these initiatives point to the general objectives in the European Union to build a cloud environment that it is interconnected, interoperable, trusted, sustainable, and cloud to edge enabled. Next slide, please. With regard to the cloud market characteristics, we take stock of the conclusions of the reports I mentioned at the beginning that are, as I say, very recent and very comprehensive market studies of the clouds. The conclusions of the three of them are very aligned and they point to similar competition concerns. They identify the significant economies of scale, ecosystem and network effects, switching and interoperability barriers, barriers to entry and expansion, all of these characteristics are leading to a significant market concentration, and they point to competition concerns. Next slide. So in view of these concerns, they acknowledge that some of them can be addressed by facilitating interoperability, standardization, and switching. So in our report, we describe the general barriers and problems that can be encountered in this regard. We provide some examples of the different public and private initiatives to facilitate this interoperability, as well as how this is tackled in recent EU regulation, and in particular the Data Act. Next slide. Then we focus on the interplay with electronic communications. As general developments, we see that there are different competition and cooperation dynamics between the players. On one hand, we see a trend of telecommunications provider moving towards the cloud due to three different movements. First of all, because of the network update due to network virtualization, that in turn it will allow them to provide new services that are based on network as a service solutions, and adopting potentially new business models that are closer to how platforms services are provided. And also from a more forward-looking perspective, we may see how telecommunications operators may play a role in the development of edge computing because of their capability of the networks. Also, on the other hand, we also see how cloud providers are moving towards the telecommunications network and services. First, by investing in networks. At the beginning, maybe the rationale was to meet their own needs for self-provision, for instance, to connect data centers. But with the time, some of them are also making available this infrastructure to third parties. And we also see some few cases of some examples of cloud providers providing electronic communication services, for instance, in private network solutions. And nevertheless, for the time being, cooperation and partnerships are predominant. And this is because, on the one hand, cloud providers benefit from the connectivity and capillarity of electronic communications providers' networks, and also because of their links, the well-established commercial relationship with a large number of users. On the other hand, telecommunications providers also benefit from their partnerships with cloud providers. So they allow them to provide advanced services to the users, and also because of the update of the networks towards cloud-based architectures. On this, we develop further on the areas where there's cloud and edge services interplay. With regard to the connectivity required for the provision of cloud and edge computing, we also developed the migration of the different electronic communications networks towards the cloud, the core, at the run edge, backhaul and transport network, as well as the network operation and business support services. We developed on this provision of new and enhanced services based on network as a service solution. And finally, we also develop on the increasing the bundled and even tailored solutions, integrating the telecommunications network services and all the digital services, including cloud. Next slide. Thank you. While we are aware that some of these services, and in particular NAS or edge computing, are still at a very early stage of deployment, we share some early thoughts on potential regulatory considerations. We first reflect on the need to possibly adapt the definitions in the code of the definitions of the services to ensure that there is legal certainty. While the code already in one of recital 14 already mentions network virtualization, we see that there may be a need to maybe set further clarity in view of the developments that have been taking place in the last year. We also share some thoughts on those changes in market dynamics and the impact on competition, both on the potential impact on the electronic communication services and markets. There may be some possible new dependencies on, for instance, hyperscalers. Also, we may see that maybe the telecommunications provider may also have an influence on how cloud and in particular edge services develop because of this advantage that I already mentioned of their network capillarity. We also address the partnerships and although our position is that partnerships are generally positive, but we also point to have some attention to that these partnerships do not create additional barriers to entry and serve to reinforce the respective market position of telcos and cloud providers. And in particular, we pay particular attention to the impact of exclusive agreements. We also develop on digital markets ecosystem effects, and as mentioned also in previous BEREC reports, such as the Internet Ecosystem 1, we call for having a broader view of the whole ecosystem so we can have this better understanding of the risk of leveraging market power into adjacent markets, and also what could be the impact of the control of certain facilities, for instance, cloud and edge, in the development of other technologies due to the synergies among them. For instance, when it comes to artificial intelligence or IoT services. We follow by underlining the importance of IPA's openness and also to pay attention on how those are exposed to ensure interoperability, avoid lock-in and discriminations, and also any possible negative impact on net neutrality or cybersecurity. We underline the challenges of investment, both regarding to this network update towards cloud-based architectures, and also this need of additional investments in edge computing. We address the interplay of the growing EU digital legislation, need to ensure that there is a coherent implementation of the Data Act, the DMA, the Artificial Intelligence Act, among many others, many other regulations that have been passed recently, and also the need to establish a coherent also institutional setup for the implementation of this pieces of legislation and underlying the need for cooperation of these public bodies to ensure that there are not contradictions and that unnecessary red tape for the users and different players that is created. And finally, we also develop on the impact on the European digital sovereignty, sustainability, and the digital divide. Next slide. We end our report with some possible future trends in view of the information collected. Namely, we expect that in the coming years, the cloud market will continue growing. Because of this growth, we will expect that the relevance for multi-cloud and switching solutions will grow in the coming years. We also expect that these partnerships between different players will continue. and that further initiatives to ensure cloud-based continuum will take place, and will also imply further network transformation to adapt to this objective of the cloud continuum. Finally, we, considering their current position in the market and role, we expect that the hyperscalers' role will still be important in the coming years. Next slide. So as mentioned at the beginning, the document has been published for public consultation. We expect the inputs until the 24th of April. This is a standard deadline compared to the standard one. We look for inputs to any parts of the report, but we also put forward 7 questions on more specific matters. And there is also the possibility to upload a complementary document. That will be very useful for us, that if you upload a document, you make the link with the different parts of the report that you expect to have some changes in it. In any case, it's not necessary to respond to all the questions and to comment on all of the parts to submit the contributions. After the public consultation, we will take into account all the inputs and look forward to approval and publication in October this year. This is everything from our side. Pass the floor to Margarita and Chiara. Thank you.
Hi, hello, good morning. Thank you, Maria. Good morning to you all. I and Chiara, we are going to present the draft BEREC report on the entry of large content and application providers, from now on CAPs, into the markets for electronic communications, networks and services. Next slide, please. This report gives an overview of the presence and impact of large CAPs on the markets for electronic communications, networks and services in Europe. It presents their strategies and business models, the market dynamics, as well as CAPs' relations with traditional electronic communication networks and services providers in terms of competition, cooperation and interdependence, with several examples of these relations. It also provides 3 case studies where significant investments by large CAPs have been taking place in the last years. Content delivery networks, submarine cables and internet relay services. That is, services providing enhancing privacy features like tracking prevention. And it also presents some cases where electronic communication networks and services providers' ability to provide access to the networks and or to some functionalities and technologies may be affected. Well, it builds on a questionnaire sent to 9 major CAPs: Akamai, Amazon, Apple, Cloudflare, DAZN, Google, Meta, Microsoft and Netflix, and on the 3 workshops organized with stakeholders on international submarine connectivity in the European Union, cloud services and internet relay services. Next slide, please. Okay, as you may see in this graph, the larger CAPs have been investing increasingly in own infrastructures. In 2022, that investment was led by Amazon. Collectively, the 5 largest CAPs invested a total of 146 billion euros in capital expenditures in 2022, globally, which represents a compound annual growth rate of 29% since 2015. And compared with 2019, they have more than doubled, as you may see. These investments have been made namely on data centers, content delivery networks, submarine cables, terrestrial and satellite networks, mainly to support the delivery of their own services and bringing content closer to end users. Next slide, please. Well, and what about the main takeaways? Well, in what concerns large CAPs' footprint, it can be represented by their points of presence. So via the questionnaire that we made, the working group collected data concerning the points of presence of 9 large CAPs within the European Economic Area. For the purpose of the report, a point of presence was defined as a physical location or facility that houses network equipment to interconnect with other networks. As you may see in the picture, so both the number of caps by country and the cities, or in some cases metropolitan areas, where the caps have at least one POP. It is possible to conclude that these caps are present throughout all European Economic Area countries, with the only exception of Liechtenstein, and that there are 90 cities where caps have at least one point of presence. The number of cities per country in which the 9 caps have points of presence varies greatly. In some countries, the caps are only present in one city. This is the case of Belgium, while in others they are present in many cities, like in Italy, where they are present in 16 different cities. The data gathered also show that in 60% of the countries of the European Economic Area, the caps are present in more than one city in the same country. In nearly 20% of the cities, almost all the caps have a POP. In almost 50% of the cities, only one cap is present. This is, as you see, very heterogeneous. And because of this, they are in specific countries and cities, which seems to indicate that although the approach followed by each cap really varies, notwithstanding, the European Economic Area countries seem indeed to represent an important part of the CAPS strategy. Now I'll give the floor to Chiara to further present the main takeaways. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Margherita. So I will now focus on the 3 case studies that we carried out. The first one is on CDN, so content delivery networks. And what we observe is that the CDN market has significantly evolved. Previously, large caps, they relied on commercial CDNs providers for their services. But now large caps, they have been increasingly rolling out their own CDN infrastructure networks. And such infrastructures, they are mostly used for self-provision, but some major caps, they also provide CDN services to third parties. So the business model has been changing over the years. And the impact on telco providers, so ECS, ECN providers, is double-fold. On the one hand, the rollout of CDNs by large caps exerts competitive pressures on the business model of transit providers. But on the other hand, on-net CDNs, so CDNs which are deployed on the network of the internet service providers, they also allow to reduce capacity costs for ISPs by locating content closer to end users. And even if the market entry, so on the previous slide, please. So even if there is a market entry, the analysis of the CDN market shows that the commercial CDNs is concentrated around a few players. You can use different criteria to define this, the market share, so that we detail in the report. It's concentrated around few players, and the concentration is also expected to grow significantly in the coming years. On the next slide, please. Another case study that we carried out is on submarine cables. Submarine cables, they play a key role. In 2023, they carried 99% of all international IP traffic, including the services provided by CAPS to consumers, of course. And the ecosystem, again, here is significantly evolved the last years. Large caps, they have become important owners or investors in transport network infrastructure. The deployment strategies of CAPS and telecom operators are different. So on the one hand, large CAPS, they deploy submarine cables primarily for their own use and also on routes which are often already covered. So they finally have limited impact on the global network resilience. And on the other hand, traditional ECS and ECNs provider, they still play a role on the transmission of data for other CAPS, so smaller CAPS who did not deploy their own infrastructure, and also for connecting areas which may not be economically profitable. So after these 2 case studies, what we observe is that large CAPS, they insource what was formerly purchased from traditional ECN or ECS providers or from other third parties. And they have large hubs, they have deployed their own physical infrastructures like CDNs or data centers, as well as network infrastructures such as submarine cables. And by building their own large autonomous systems, they also rely now to a significantly less extent, or sometimes not at all, on long-distance transit providers, transit provided by the ECN and ECS operators, the more traditional actors, let's say. We also carried out, on the next slide, we also carried out another case study, which is focusing on internet relay services. So as Margarita was mentioning, it's services which are used to ensure confidentiality by encrypting the data traffic directly on the user's device or in the user's domain. Some large caps have been proposing this, providing these services, such as Apple, Google, and Microsoft. And we wanted to look into this because these services, they created, let's say, quite some stir when they were launched a couple of years ago. And we wanted to look into the service for the potential impact on traffic routing, or more generally on the telecom operators' activities. So what we observe is that at this stage, the user uptake is not very significant, but in case if this increases, these services, they deserve to be monitored, given, as I said, the potential impact on traffic flow, on the utilization of internet access providers' current interconnections, and as a consequence also on the decentralized approach of the internet infrastructure. And then after the 3 case studies, we also have a more exploratory, let's say, chapter. It's based on feedbacks that we, both as BEREC and Telecom NRAs, we have received from stakeholders over the last years. What we get as a feedback is that some operating system providers, sometimes they can restrict the telecom provider's ability to correctly give access to services and to the network itself. We have some typical examples which include access to 5G slicing functionalities or other restrictions to the provision of the slices, the potential implications of provider-specific solutions for standardized services like rich communication services, as well as some difficulties that some MVNOs or smaller mobile operators, they seem to face in setting up some functionalities of the devices or in configuring the network profile of when the eSIM are used. So here again, it's quite exploratory. The list of the cases that we present is not exhaustive. We would really count also on the stakeholders' feedback during the public consultation to reinforce or correct this chapter in our first analysis. On the next slide, we see, I think, yes, just the date for the public consultation. So it is the same as for the report on cloud and edge computing. It's until 24th of April. We welcome any feedback on all the report, and as mentioned, of course, we particularly welcome feedback with which is on, for instance, on data or actual information that we can cite and reuse, and integrate and discuss in the report as well. And just like the report on the cloud and edge computing, our report will also be published in mid-October 2024 after the integration of the stakeholders' input. Thank you very much. So I give the floor back to Maria and Ola for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Chiara. Trying to see if you have any questions in the chat. But yeah. Feel free to drop a question in the chat or raise your hand if you want to ask a question. I see one from Beltuk, which OS have been mentioned. I think that's to you, Chiara, or?
Yes, so we focus on, for the operating system providers, is the 2 main ones, so iOS and Android. And there is also a previous question I see from Dean Babley. We only consider a capped investment this report.
So I raised my hand, but I don't know if you saw it. I'm back here. May I take the floor?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you for all the work by both all our NRA colleagues and Stratix and Plum. And this is obviously, as we've just been hearing, a very complex set of intertwined considerations, lots of different markets, different providers. It's been evolving very rapidly, and I think we've all mentioned that. And I think it just we'll all have a look in detail at the 104 pages of the two reports combined, and we look forward to responding. I think I'd be quite interested as an initial question to understand if you have a perspective already on, if you can talk a little bit more about how you define the market. Because I think, when we look at the traditional telecom sector itself, I think it's been subject to a lot of evolution and with hyper specialization, the move away from vertically integrated operators into lots of different strata of telecom services. And then you've got other layers of the internet stack, if you will, or the digital ecosystem. And so, I mean, it's a very complex set of interactions, and I think it's important that we try to understand better how those interactions work and which markets or sub-markets we're talking about, how they interact with one another, and the various competitive dynamics. I think one thing that I'd be also interested to see is if those evolutions, for instance, might have had a positive impact on the competitive dynamic in the traditional sector. For instance, how those evolutions might have enabled some of the competitive alternative telecom operators to be able to compete on a more equal footing with some of the larger incumbent telecom operators. I'd love to hear those initial thoughts you may have on these interactions and on the various sub-markets, and also perhaps if you're already thinking about follow-up research, because I think as you've all been saying, it's early days and it's constantly evolving, and I think it will be important to deepen the understanding, especially as this continues to move on and evolve. And as Stratix was saying earlier, as CSPs start to get more involved, perhaps in the cloud market. So if you could explain a little bit on how you understand market, sub-markets, and the various interactions between the different layers of the stack, would be super interesting. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean-Jacques. Very, very interesting questions, of course, and I think things we are starting to or have worked on with BEREC, and this is, I guess, a starting point for us as well, and this is something we will look into. And I mean, Chiara or Maria, anything you want to comment on this?
I think it is ready for the report on cloud, but on our side, what we also wanted to do in the report is that, of course, when we see large caps role and strategies in ECS and DCS markets, of course, it can be very broad. And that's why we wanted to focus on 3 main case studies, which, of course, it's not exhaustive at all. It doesn't say also anything about the importance of other markets or that could have been analyzed as well. Of course, it was a choice and just a first selection. Maybe what we did more in the line of the questions and the comment is that something that we did in our previous report on the internet ecosystem, where we had a broader approach, not defining markets, but just looking at the interactions on different elements of the internet ecosystem. So this could also be of interest, and there we also analyzed a bit the interactions between the presence of some actors on one element of the internet ecosystem, how this interacts or has an impact on another element. So there was a broader overview. In this case, we just restricted a bit, zoomed in, let's say, on some specific services. I don't know if Margarita and Maria, you want to complement.
Maybe just to add something, but exactly in line what Chiara has just said. So our starting basis was exactly the BEREC report on the internet ecosystem, where we have a very, a picture on how we consider the different layers and the different elements that are in each layer. And in how they are interconnected. And as Chiara was saying, the idea was to understand in which layers are caps entering in, and in which layers are they investing in, and from when, since when. So that was the idea. And of course, it was not on the spirit of delineating the market as we really do on market analysis. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, yes, well, indeed, as Chiara and Margaret had mentioned, it's not the first time that as BEREC we look at this broader perspective. Indeed, the Internet Ecosystem Report is a very good example. We also have the 5G Ecosystem Report, as said, we see more and more how the different elements of the entire digital ecosystem are more and more interrelated and adding complexity also to our work. So we will indeed have to come across this topic again in the future. With regard to particular to the cloud and edge and network virtualization, we may think it's probably still a bit too early to know how the competition dynamics will evolve. We point to different potential issues that may arise, but at this point, this is still at a very early stage of implementation. So we will see in the coming years, and it will depend very much on what decisions are taken by the private players. So we will keep an eye on it, and because it's the future of the sector. So, but for the time being, we are just monitoring what's happening.
Thanks, Maria. I think we have another question in the chat as well from AVH Cloud. Daniel?
Yes, many thanks. Thank you for the presentation. A short question to Maria regarding the report. Basically, will the BEREC define recommendations based on the public consultation process in its final report? Because if I understand correctly, for this more assessment, and if so, what will be the ultimate aim of the report? I get the objectives, but what is the objective after its final publication in October? Thanks.
Thank you, Daniel, for the question. At this moment, our conclusions are very general. We are mostly pointing to recommendations to ourselves on the different issues we, as regulators, would like to follow, but I think it's really too early to make any specific recommendation on how for the stakeholders or any regulatory measure. Is not the case for the time being.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Maria. And I think that would be the final words. I think we are the closing time at 11, so that's perfect. And I hope you join us at the BEREC Stakeholder Forum in 2 weeks, a little less. Any final words from any of the co-chairs?
Just to thank the participants then for their interest in this work.
Yes, and invite them to submit their opinion on the public consultations. Thank you.
Yes, the same in my case. We thank for the participation, and we look forward to the inputs and comments on the work done.